Hello, my name is Mena Hanna, and I am General Director and CEO of Spoleto Festival USA. Welcome to tonight's Patron Talk with Gakire Katese. Thank you for joining us this evening and for supporting Spoleto Festival. I wanted to give a few remarks on Kiki's life with some biographical details about her. She is an actor, a playwright, a director, a cultural entrepreneur, a real force of nature in Rwanda. She created the first contemporary dance company in Rwanda. She's the founder of 2 festivals in Rwanda, and she's the founder of 2 incredible initiatives, the Rwandan Professional Dreamers, and this second initiative, which is closely associated with her, and we'll be discussing it at length tonight, called Ingoma Nchia, or Ingoma for short. It's a troupe of female drummers in Rwanda. And she's also been instrumental in using art to commemorate the Rwandan genocide and pushing forward discussions, healing, almost kind of like national and institutional therapy through her initiatives as an artist in Rwanda. One of these projects that centers on the themes of conflict and culture that was born out of this confrontation with the genocide is a play called The Book of Life. It's a one-woman show starring Kiki that includes this drumming troupe in Goma and has projections and a set, a spare set, but a set. And The Book of Life will receive its North American premiere at the 2023 Spoleto Festival. So I'm very excited to talk to you about it tonight. Let's welcome Kiki. Good evening, Kiki.
Good evening, Mark.
How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. And you?
I'm very well. You're joining us from Munich, where you're working
Yes.
on another play.
Yes.
That's great. So why don't we talk a little bit about your origin story? How you got to where you are today, and what that has to do with the art that you create.
Yes. When I was a child, I never dreamed of becoming an artist in general. And it's only when I went back to Rwanda, because I was born in Congo, in DRC. I spent 20 years there, and it was only possible to go back to Rwanda after the genocide. So 2 years after, I was back in Rwanda. It was my first time discovering my country. I almost didn't even know that I was Rwandan when I landed in Rwanda. And for many years, I've been claiming being Congolese. I said I was made of Congo. And so I landed at the National University of Rwanda as a student in political sciences. And in 1998, a group of artists, African artists, historians, and sociologists, they came to Rwanda to write as a duty of memory. And I found myself in this project. And this is how I landed on stage. And since then, I've been more and more on stage and less in class.
So your work is very closely associated with the Rwandan genocide, especially this work, The Book of Life. Why were you in Congo to begin with? Why don't you tell us a little bit about the history there?
Yes, my parents fled in Congo in the 60s. My father in the 60s and my mother in the 70s when she got engaged with my father. And I was born in exile. So when it was possible to go back home, my parents started sending children as they finished the secondary school to start university. And when I started working in the arts, I got a scholarship to study in Paris for 2 years theater. And when I came back, I took over the position of artistic director at the University Center for Art and Drama. And of course, it was impossible to do any work in Rwanda without talking about the genocide. The country was coping with the consequences of the genocide, and we were in the process of rebuilding, of healing, of reconciliation. It was impossible to do other work than supporting the rebuilding of the country. And I remember the first play I did, it was in 2004 for the 10th commemoration of the genocide, immediately when I came back from Paris. And I remember that the play was narrating what happened in the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. But it was full of testimonies telling people how people killed, how they were chased, they were being chased, how we died. And I thought I knew what I was doing, but when we were touring in schools and in villages, I realized that I was causing trauma by telling again what happened. I was reactivating the trauma and the pain and those days. And I was the first to be shocked, because I never meant to make people relive what happened in 1994. And I remember promising myself to find a way to reconcile with that story, that horrific story, to find a way because we were also in the process of reconciliation. How do we reconcile with our own wounds? How do we reconcile with death? And personally, I also discovered when I arrived in Rwanda that I had a bigger family that I never had a chance to meet. I met my grandmother when they were burying her. I met my uncles where we were burying them. I met everyone when we were burying them. And I felt like I didn't necessarily have the connection I needed to have. And I, in the process of remembering or commemorating, I was not able to do that because I first needed to meet the people, to know them, and then to start remembering them. Otherwise, there is nothing to remember. So that's how the Book of Life came.
So it's an incredibly moving work, but I think, before we dive into the Book of Life, we should discuss a little bit about some of the political circumstances that Rwanda faced immediately following the genocide, because I think that gives a little bit of context. So, oftentimes, especially in more recent history, governments take very severe approaches often to control some of the discourse that's happening in that country. One of the things that Rwanda did is that it is mentioned in the new constitution of Rwanda. The genocide, broke the country. It was effectively a civil war. So there was a new constitution that was redrafted for the country. That the genocide claimed victim of 1 million people, and it's kind of a very significant thing to put in the founding document of a nation. And then the second thing is that divisive rhetoric that stokes the divisions between the Hutus and the Tutsis, especially, is outlawed in Rwanda. And this reminds me a little bit about my experience in Germany when I was living there, where imagery of the Third Reich, of National Socialism, is also outlawed. I remember I was reading a book by Philip Roth called The Plot Against America, and I bought the American version of the book, and the American version of the book had a swastika in the front. The book is about how potentially close it's a work of fiction, but still, how potentially close America was to Third Reich-style fascism in the 1930s through the Charles Lindbergh potential presidency. And to read the book on the subway, I actually put some stage masking tape over the swastika so that no one would ask me questions about what I was reading. So I wonder, how do you balance the conversation that needs to be had through art in order to try to engender the healing of a people while showing capacity for forgiveness, especially when there are legal demarcations around that discourse? Sorry, it's a tough question.
Yes, I want to. I made the choice that the work that the arts will be supporting the effort of rebuilding a country and the effort of reconciliation. Even though I also recognize myself that I don't necessarily have the tools. I don't know how to do that. How do you? I always ask myself and people that it's somehow very easy to rebuild a country, the infrastructures that were being destroyed and everything. But how do you rebuild the human being? How do you? I don't know. I don't pretend to have the answer, but I only know that the art can recreate, or create new symbols to allow people to at least symbolically do the things that they cannot really do in the reality. We can only dream of a new country built on new foundations with people with new values, um, and suggest that vision, that it is possible, and support it. And and because we know that we are rising from a genocide, from death, I want my work to be to be very firmly about life, because we and then in this conversation we need to have both sides. We can't have we can't only privilege the voice of the victims, even if it's a stronger voice compared to the perpetrators, but we need all to have the conversation, because all of us, we failed. No one gain anything in this genocide. It's our failures, the failures of the failure of Rwanda and the failure of the world. So Rwanda had to find also other new ways to cope with the genocide, because if we do, even in terms of justice, that's why we went. We worked with a traditional way of dealing with conflicts, because it was not possible through the courts. They say that it would have taken us 100 years or more than that to treat all the cases that we had to. So we did it our ways, because we didn't have 100 days, 100 years to invest only for justice. And somehow also we also understood that is there justice for a genocide? Even though is there justice for a genocide? So we did things symbolically. The perpetrators who had a strong commitment in the preparation of the genocide were really had very strong sentences just to make case of that. And then we released the perpetrators. We released them back in the society, because we could not even make the prison function properly. We could not even afford justice.
Right. Wow.
So in this position, you are very humble, and you do what you can.
So, I mean, the thing that is amazing about the Book of Life is how life affirming it is. You're just so that I can summarize kind of what the task is in this play. is you worked with individual perpetrators of the genocide and asked them to write letters to their victims. And it gets incredibly personal for you. We can get into that a bit later. But you start this out by saying that in Rwandan culture, we often say we. We say we did this, we did that, we worked together, and you were working with one individual and he said, we committed the atrocities, we murdered this person. And you corrected him and he said, no, you did it. In this instance, it is a single soul individual. So tell me about that shift, because that is a major kind of cultural shift that needs to be had in order for reconciliation to be part of the social and cultural fabric.
Yes, but in that period, also 2009, this is when I started the Book of Life. Rwanda was rewriting its history, because even the course of history was not taught in schools, because the history was full of seeds of division. We were talking about Tutsi and Hutu and dividing people like that. And the first thing is also redefining even Rwandans as Rwandans first, because we didn't take any advantage of being Hutu and Tutsis. So that was the first thing. And then the action of rewriting, I found it interesting, but it was again done by a handful of people, historians, academicians, and it was about the history of a country. And I wanted to find a way for that country, the people, the same way we massively participated in the genocide. I thought that we should massively participate in any action that tries to restore life. So in this, it was, and then also in Rwanda, we have like more than 200 memorial sites, big or less or little. We have, at every corner of the country, you will find a memorial place for the genocide. And I had the feeling that we were archiving there the bones, the skulls, our failures. We actively archived death. And I needed a place where we can find life also, because this is the balance. And when I started the Book of Life, I worked with perpetrators, I worked with survivors, also with widows and orphans. With the perpetrators, yes, of course, there is this we, because it's huge. How do you take responsibility of this horror? So when I went to work with perpetrators who have confessed their crime and were in rehabilitation camps, they all said and they say we didn't do anything, we don't know why we are here. And I remember telling them that's fine, if I'm sorry you are here, but I came to work with people who had killed. If you didn't kill, you should leave. And no one left. And then the next step was that you can say this is an opportunity for you to say the things that you were not able to say before. So how it's about you, and people will remember what you said. So use this opportunity wisely. And the first thing is have to say, I killed this person. It's important, even for the survivors, to hear that you recognize that and find a way, maybe, how can you undo this, even in the right things? Is it possible if you say that today I go back in that day and I don't kill you? It matters, because this is the only place where we can do this through arts. So it was important to try to rehabilitate life in that way.
How did this work help you confront your own personal loss and trauma through the genocide?
Yes, as I said, I accompanied my mother to bury her mother, my grandmother, to bury a big sister. And most of the time I felt like a stranger. I didn't know these people. And I remember when I was working with the widows, they were also suspicious. They say, what do you want to do with our pain?
Yeah.
Why? Why do you want? And I told them, I need to cry. I'm not able to cry. I'm not able to grieve because I need first to meet the people. And I remember spending a whole week with them, crying with them and laughing and putting smiles and face and on the names that we have. So it helps me to 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 uh, to have a connection with my people, and to own this pain, because I think we need the world, the whole world needs to own, to claim that's crime against humanity, and find a way to heal.
Mm.
Um, so yes, I mean, and also I was really happy that this was an opportunity to just to that also reactivate the links between the widows and their husband, or the orphans with their father, because even though the orphans wrote, when they wrote, they were like 20. um, at the time that they take the pen, they immediately became the small child who miss the mom or the father. And it was really a good opportunity to reactivate that link, and become and see the child again, being happy to call someone papa, and
Mm.
to give the telephone number and say, please call me, or to say, I've grown up, and to say the things we never say in Africa in general. We never say I love you, but to have the opportunity to say I love you and to say goodbye. And it was becoming really that book of life that I wanted us to write, so that when we go in memorial site, yes, they are dead, we have proof, because we needed to prove the world that a genocide happened in Rwanda. But we can also go in another space where we find them alive, when we can have a chat, when we can write to them, when we can talk to them, when we can laugh, and then go back to the reality.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly what you capture in the Book of Life, because you know it's a catharsis. There are moments of crying and moments of laughter, um, and somehow you manage to not buckle under the weight of the subject. I think you're a skilled actor. I think it's part of it. But also there is this kind of raw power in the Ingoma drummers that you are surrounded by. Can you tell me a little bit about Ingoma, that project individually, and how it is interpolated into this work?
Yes, Ingomacha is the first ever company of women drummers in Rwanda that I created in 2004. And because for many centuries it was forbidden for women even to touch a drum. So um, it was possible. And also I think women always, most of the time, I found they take power only when men are absent.
Hmm.
And in the case of Rwanda, men were killed.
Mm.
They were dead. So women had to step in, and in this space of drumming that was dominated by men, it was abandoned, and now women are reviving this culture that was disappearing. So they are really symbols of life, of the heartbeat, and of joy. And I think this is what they bring in the book of life. I talk about that, but they they express it. They are the real proof of this explosion of life and joy that's always have to follow um, uh, 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 um, a tragedy like a genocide. and that is happening also in Rwanda. So it's for me, it was important that they are part of the book of life. Uh, Before we recorded the drumming and the songs and everything, but now that they're on stage, it brings another experience that I can't express with words, that needs to be expressed with the drumming, which is a very powerful way to express joy and life.
Absolutely. Having them on stage, it's like this raw, powerful sound. But it's a raw, powerful sound that is somehow tempered by centuries of tradition that is then upturned by the female empowerment of what you're doing.
Yes, and in Rwanda, even though the name of the group is Ingoma Sha, Ingoma, it means drum, and Sha, it means new. It's a new drum, but in Rwanda also the words that uh, talk about power is Ingoma. That is about leadership. And I think with the gender policy in Rwanda that is very strong, there is a need also to be translated through arts of that power that is taken by women at every level in every field. So I feel like it is very important that even in the narratives, even in the culture, it really mirrors what is happening in Rwanda truly.
There's a sense of this project particularly, but also some of the other work that we're doing at Spoleto, which recontextualizes American history as also having an origin point in Africa. Last year we did this opera that was a world premiere based on the life of Omar ibn Said, an enslaved West African Muslim scholar who was sold into bondage here in Charleston in 1807. This year we have, and we also had a number of African artists last year perform. This year, in addition to the Book of Life, we're going to have an African dance company. We're going to have African musicians perform. I think there's something that is important in recognizing and taking back Charleston's link to the African continent. So for me, having works like this, it's also about understanding ourselves in this country and understanding what we need to do in order to look at art as a transcending vehicle that can, work through social and cultural disparities.
Yes, absolutely. That's why I'm always happy to. I mean, the women I'm bringing, they don't speak English. They didn't go to school there, but every time they perform, something happens because they speak this universal language that is art, and that is very powerful. That everyone understands. That connects the world. So yes, looking so much forward about that.
As am I. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your next projects, and then we'll transition to question and answer with the audience, who will be typing their questions.
Okay, I am in Munich in a playwright residency, and I'm writing a new play that might be called Sweet Dreams or I Have a Drum. We are thinking about that, but narrates the play narrates the story of the women drummers, how the journey was, and what it means. It's just it's about equality. That's why I want the play to be really called I Have a Drum, because it echoes I Have a Dream. It talks
Wow.
about racial equality. In our case, it talks about gender equality, and I think there is something that still miss in the culture. For me, it is important that the social transformation that happens in Rwanda in terms of gender has also to have an impact in culture. So that's all because up to now I think that our culture is not necessarily as women friendly as I would like. We still have the old sayings. We have the old songs that doesn't necessarily empower women. So through the show, it's deconstructing all the myths that doesn't empower women and proposing other narratives, other songs, other drums, and taking really taking ownership of our culture. Because for me, culture has to be made of people, and I want the Rwandan culture to be made of Rwanda and Rwandans, men as well as women. And up to now, women didn't participate. I'm not participating in the making of culture.
I
So
love that. Yeah, culture made of people. I think it's spectacular. Thank you. What questions do we have from the audience? Something just popped up. Did we get that? I don't see it on my screen. Just sorry, Kiki, give it a minute. Okay. What book did you read recently that changed how you think?
oh my gosh, no, I'm not reading anymore. I'm so busy with the challenges, with making things happening, and busy with myself trying to write. So we don't have necessarily a culture of reading. So I'm not going to lie here. Oh my God, the last book that I read, it was really long ago.
Actually, I have a book in mind that is germane to this discussion, which is a book by the Kenyan author Watiango Ngugi Watiango. He wrote a book called Decolonizing the Mind. And in this book, he talks about taking back ownership of the language Kiswahili so that he doesn't have to write in the language of the colonizer, have to write in English. He can write in his native tongue. What do you think about that? I mean, about that concept?
Yes, I mean, this is also my personal tragedy. As I said, I write in French. And and at a certain point, Rwanda switched from French to English, and now I'm struggling to speak English, to express myself in English, and I'm struggling also to learn Kinyarwanda. And at a certain point, I found that it was too late for me to understand it. I felt that I was gagging myself. I could not express myself because I wanted so much to write in Kinyarwanda, but I'm not able to write in Kinyarwanda. And after all, I do understand. I do understand, because even for me, it's painful to always say that I speak French. That's my mother tongue is French, but it's okay also because I'm still able to communicate with the world.
Right.
And I am made of that. This is my story, my trajectory, and I make sure that my children, they speak in Rwanda.
Good.
It's not about speaking; it's about thinking.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think they still think in French. They are made of their mother.
Well, I mean, that's the fascinating thing about language, generally speaking, is that, you know, speaking another language opens up not just a completely different literature, a different canon. It also opens up a different way of thinking, a different way of looking at the world. I mean, I think in a way, you know, I grew up in an immigrant family. One of the great takeaways of being an exile, of being an immigrant, or being any of these things, is that you do have multiple perspectives that can work contrapuntally. And sometimes I think that does weigh heavily, but that contrapuntal perspective to me is very much typified through the ability to understand different literatures, different ways of thinking, different languages. And to me, I mean, art is the most spectacular, incredible vehicle for that, because it does transcend that language barrier, as you had mentioned before. Another question we have is, what is something you hope audience members take away with them after experiencing the Book of Life?
Um, I mean, I want them to just be more aware um, that after all, life triumphs. After and it is important to to always choose life, and nurture life in any small ways possible. And yes, and to come, I mean, to find to reconcile with death. Death is the country where a lot of our people live. We should visit as often as possible the dead people and death, and not have a conflicting relationship with death. Death is the womb where so many people are resting in, and I like to embrace death.
That reminds me of an Old Testament verse, "O death, where is thy sting?" Um, yeah, that's interesting. That's cool. Any other questions we have? Yes. Who is currently inspiring you artistically?
Oh, I mean, it was a great pleasure to work with Ross Manson
Yeah, sure.
from
Yeah.
Volcanoes. I learned a lot about him, about his work, and it was I enjoyed the collaboration, full of lots of respect and understanding,
Just to
um,
clarify, Ross is the producer of the Book of Life
and the director of the
and the
show.
director as well. Thank you.
Yes. Um, but I am really into rediscovering my culture as someone who was born outside the country, and how to make it more accessible to the world, and how to take it to the next level. So yes, but I love the work of Stromae.
Oh, so do I.
you
I
know,
love Stromae. Oh my goodness.
yes.
Yeah.
So and
I want
yes,
to bring him to the festival one year. I think he's incredible. And I think what's so cool about Stromae is, again, he works within a specific language. He's Belgian, African. Is he Belgian Rwandan?
Rwandan.
Yeah, he's Belgian Rwandan. I should have known that. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I
No
did know
problem.
that. But like my wife loves his work. We're listening to his songs back in like 2010, 2011, Formidable, Alors on danse, all
Yes.
these songs.
Hmm.
And it brings us back to like a specific heady phase in our lives when we didn't have kids and we had a lot more partying in Paris. But beyond that, there's something so incalculably cool about his ability to thread from different cultures and create
Yes.
this tapestry of sound. I mean,
Mm.
he's using Bulgarian choirs, he's using African drums, he's using rap. I'm with you 100%. Yeah, I love
Yeah.
Stromae. Yeah.
Mm.
Well, I think that's all we have time for. Thank you so much, Kiki. This was such a
My pleasure.
spectacular
Thank you
talk.
for having me.
I can't wait to have you here physically in Charleston, in South Carolina. And I'd also like to thank our patrons again for everything that they do to support Spoleto Festival USA and in making the 2023 festival an incredible, unabashed success. So thank you very much. Have a good night.